Tausende, Zehntausende. Schönen Nachmittag online und natürlich hier im Hörsaal. Michael Stampfer vom WWTF, einer der Co-Organisatoren dieser Ringvorlesung. Es ist mir heute eine große Freude und Ehre, die beiden Sprecherinnen vorzustellen. Tanja, durch dich werde ich etwas später vorstellen, wenn du dann deinen Talk hast. Ich beginne mit Sarah Spiekermann-Hoff. Sarah, du bist Wirtschaftsinformatikerin, hast an der Humboldt-Universität einen PhD gemacht, dich dann habilitiert, bist seit 2009 in Wien als Leiterin des Instituts für Informationssysteme und Gesellschaft an der Wirtschaftsuniversität Wien. Die WU ist ebenso wie die Uni Wien und die TU ein zentraler Akteur für all das, was unter dem weiteren Begriff des digitalen Humanismus und der gesellschaftlichen Verknüpfung und Verankerung und Rückbindung dessen, was die digitale Revolution alles mit uns anstellt, hier in Wien einer unserer wichtigsten Akteure. Du hast unendlich viele Artikel und viele Bücher verfasst über Themen, die sich eben um die Weiterentwicklung, aber eben auch um die ethische Rückbindung von digitalen Technologien und Praktiken beschäftigen. Und um hier gleich auf deinen Talk einzugehen. Du hast seit einige Jahre intensiv Zeit in eine weltweite Aktivität gesetzt, nämlich wie kann Standardsetzen so erfolgen, und zwar in Bezug auf AI-basierte Software oder AI- und Softwareentwicklung, dass sie eben ethische Aspekte schon von Anfang an in diese Softwareentwicklung, in die AI-Entwicklung einbinden. Daraus ist ein weltweit anerkannter offizieller Ingenieursstandard geworden und das passiert nicht alle Tage. Und ich war ja dein Schüler, habe einige Tage bei dir in einem der Seminare verbracht und kann das nur allen Personen empfehlen. Es ist sensationell und daher spreche jetzt nicht ich weiter, sondern gleich du. Danke, dass du bei uns bist.
Ja, vielen, vielen Dank für diese sehr nette und freundliche Einführung. Michael, ich freue mich auch heute endlich mal eigentlich bei der Ringvorlesung hier an der Uni Wien dabei sein zu können zum Value-Based Engineering und zum IEEE 7000 Standard. I think I have to switch to English now, right? Because we have an international audience, because Vienna wants to spread out with its thinking about digital humanism. And yes, so let me start right away. I believe we are now in very, very interesting times, because it's not that we only talk about AI or envision it or look at it in films or documentaries, but in the next 18 months to 24 months, a lot of companies are already or plan to invest in artificial intelligence communication with their customers. There is a huge transition happening right now in the IT world. One more time. And as many people who have studied digital humanism and privacy and private and secure systems and so on know, is that in the past 20 years, we have actually missed out on building private and secure architectures. We created personal data markets and we went away from ethical systems and went straight into a business model-driven attention economy where a lot of data is collected about ourselves and leveraged these days to ends that most of the people working in IT don't appreciate. But now, with artificial intelligence investments ramping up, I think there is once again a possibility for companies to rethink their data architectures and the way they want to continue investing in technology and also building and operating customer interfacing technologies. And this gives us a chance to move out of centralized, super centralized, US-based, solely US-based, personal data market-driven architectures and rethink how we really want to create value around technology. So I hope that with the digital humanism movement in Vienna, we can actually showcase how to do that. And if it's not for the world, it's at least for citizens of Vienna and for potentially Austrian and German-speaking environments where we can help to make that AI transition in a better way. And let me, before I show the approach of value-based engineering and how we can really methodologically do that, I would like to put this effort also in a bigger political and economic context. We believe for a very long time that when we digitize something, that we automatically create progress, that we create value. And certainly, digitization has led to quite a lot of value creation. So, for example, the freedom that we gain through working sometimes from home, or the ability to increase mobility because we can do video calls from the train. Yeah, or the fact that we sometimes are more efficient by just writing an email instead of walking to a municipal authority. This is really creating value. But then, unfortunately, so we can say progress comes through aggregate positive value creation. And we can really look at every single technology that we build and look at the positive values created through it and have an aggregate account of what it gives in terms of benefits to society. But then if there are, of course, privacy cost or security cost or time loss cost, we must subtract this kind of negative value creation. And so the problem is, if we have too much negative values aggregating around our technologies, we should actually rationally also admit that we are not anymore in the progress story, but might fall back into regress. So, for example, if our infrastructures are so extremely vulnerable and cause sovereignty risks, control risks, security risks, privacy risks, transparency risks, then we might, despite the incredible investment in digitization, not see progress through that effort anymore. And for that reason, I believe that from an economic and political perspective, we must make an effort in the coming years, and especially with this AI entry point in the coming 2-3 years, to ensure that the value balance of our IT investments is positive. And so we have to actively think about how to create positive value and how to avoid negative values. And I would like to give you an example of what this looks like really in practice on a very detailed and small example of cookie notifications. With the GDPR and data protection regulation in Europe, we thought, of course, that this legal effort would lead to privacy. This was the goal of the regulation. But now, when we as users are going online every single day, these cookie notifications are basically annoying us and flying into our faces regularly. And then we have 3 options here. And when we say we accept all, the cookies, we lose the privacy. When we say we reject them all, we are very afraid that we cannot access the service anymore, which oftentimes happens. Or we lose time if we avoid, or if we clicked on the bottom where it shows all the purposes for using the data. So what you see here in this example is, here is a privacy regulation. It aims to protect privacy, but in truth, it doesn't protect privacy. Instead, it very often leads to a loss of privacy, a loss of service, or a loss of time. So you have a triple negative value aggregation. And whilst your company, your organization is officially compliant, it does not create any value. And this is something I would like to make you think about, because I don't think that this should be the future of our information systems environments. Value-based engineering, it's called engineering because it looks at these little small system details also. And it allows you to anticipate that this is not the kind of future we want to build. And to work also on that level of detail. So to sum up, like a political story on one side, an economic story, and a very detailed technical engineering story on the other, I would like to conclude that we need a new form of value creation in our economic system, and therefore at the core of our innovation efforts, which are now, these days, almost all of them, IT system related. And I would like to present to you how we can actually do that practically, not theoretically, practically. There is a history to what I want to present to you today, as what value-based engineering is, a history of my own thinking and thought process about this matter, a journey that I did not go alone. I did write the book Digital Ethics, that's also coming out now in the English-speaking world, where I kind of formulated and showed the vision of what values mean in IT digitization in the 21st century. But most importantly, as Michael just introduced me about, is that I vice-chaired for many years, for 5 years, an international IEEE standard for ethical model process, a model process for building ethical systems. That was then adopted in 2022 by ISO, which rarely happens. ISO does not adopt a lot of international standards, but it did. And in order to be able to use this ISO standards can be pretty complex, like this one. It's not so straightforward that anyone buys a standard and then just puts that into practice. I wrote also the textbook Value-Based Engineering that's now being taught to students, both professional ethical AI people, as well as, of course, university students. Now, value-based engineering is not a method that came out of the blue. Value-based engineering contains a lot of best practices that a lot of people in the academic and the professional environment have been working on for 2, if not 3 decades. Value-sensitive design, many of you might have heard about. Value-sensitive design is a practice of building value-driven systems and ethical systems that was started in the mid-1990s by a scholar called Batya Friedman. There is a huge HCI community. They do co-design, participatory design. Now philosophers and system engineers working together on machine ethics and moral machines. Risk-based design, impact assessment-driven design. There are whole communities, like for example, the technical impact assessment bureaus that work for our parliaments in most European nations. And they have been doing design and having been thinking about these problems for 3 decades. So it was very important to integrate their thinking into value-based engineering because you don't want to make up your own thing, but you want to build on what's there already. Perhaps somebody could get me some water if possible. Now, within value-based engineering, this 80-page ISO standard, we discern 3 phases of system design and also development. The first phase, also what you have to know about the standard, is that it is a process standard which would tell a company or innovation team, task by task, activity by activity, what to do in order to go from a value exploration phase to concrete system, technical system requirements. Everybody who works in the IT world knows that without concrete and well-formulated technical requirements, you cannot build a good system. You need to know exactly what's expected from your machine. But such a concrete list that you may be working on in your agile Scrum tasks, yeah, is something that is so detailed that it is far away from, thank you so much, from a philosophical exploration of what values you want to create for this world with your AI system. And this spread to have a value vision, value aggregate, vision of what to do for society with a digital humanism in mind on one side, and then these nitty-gritty kind of settings in your systems, like what your cookie notification should be looking like exactly, is a huge gap of concreteness from very strong abstraction to very little detail. And how to go from that top level principle, human rights driven thinking, let's say, to these little gritty settings. You need exact instructions for innovation teams and engineers how to go from one to the other side. And this is what's being offered by value-based engineering. And I show you now very roughly what the 3 phases, process areas of the standard then actually tell companies and innovation teams to do. And the first phase is about ConOps. Many system designers know this term. Concept and context that's being looked at of what? Of your system of interest. So I'm just having a very, very highly granular perspective here on a toy's possible architecture. So you have a teddy bear, and this teddy bear might be a biometric teddy bear, and it has a voice system, and it has a vision system, and has gesture controller, voice controller. So you have those components within your system of interest. But most of these devices these days are not locally operated. They are hooked up to a system of systems. They are hooked up to artificial intelligence components that run somewhere else in this world. Like OpenAI's speech system, GPT, this AI system is somewhere operated somewhere else. It's part of the system of such a biometric tool, potentially. So, in value-based engineering, we have this system of interest, and it's system of system rounded, and we look at exactly what this technology looks like, because it's here where data flows happen, where personal data is going over the network, where security configurations are made, where decisions about decentralized or centralized architectures are being made. So value-based engineering does not look only at stakeholders, you see here the people on the slide, does not only ask people what they expect in a participatory design manner from the system, what needs they have, what value they want to see there, what they're afraid of, but also we couple this understanding with an understanding of the system itself. And when we have that, only when we have this very concrete understanding of the system, we explore the values that are associated with that exact system of interest, with its system of system and its direct and indirect stakeholders. So for such a teddy bear, for example, we would then ask, against the background of this service, how it portrays itself in the children's room, but also how it portrays itself from an engineering perspective. Do you see, what kind of values do you see created in a positive sense, and which ones do you see threatened, and how do you prioritize that? And what we do here, now something funny comes in, or something great and powerful comes in. Here we combine the traditional moral philosophies, virtue ethics, utilitarianism and duty ethics, with engineering perspective. So we have stakeholder representatives and engineers in the room, and we ask them 3 questions. We have them make 3 judgments. First of all, we collect from them the pros and cons, utilitarian arguments, what values are created, what values may be at risk. That's utilitarianism. Then we ask a very important question that is hardly ever asked these days when systems are developed. This question is, what will this system, if it was built the way it's currently conceived, do to the character and habituation of the people using the system in the long term? For example, our smartphones make us highly addicted. They also infringe our freedom. They put us into sometimes some vicious patterns. And this patterns of behavior. And this is exactly what's being asked by virtue ethics. So we look at the virtues and vices that are being created through the use of such a system, if it was configured the way it's currently perceived to be done by the engineers. So that's the virtue ethical question. And then thirdly, we ask the people in the room who are part of this innovation process, what's actually important for you? What personal maxims do you have? What values are really important to you? How important is autonomy for you? How important is dignity for you? And if there are people in this innovation group who feel that certain values are hugely important for them, that they think it's almost like a duty for them to protect those values in the system, this is being collected here. And we also embrace and the standard then other ethical approaches if needed. Now, what we do is we work pretty technical. After a wonderful, let's say, post-it-driven workshop on those philosophies, we enter all of this thinking and we try to accumulate it and aggregate it in a structured form. This is what the Excel screenshot shows here. So all the values collected and facts observed from utilitarianism, virtue ethics, and duty ethics are being aggregated in such a structured manner. The values are written out. Yeah? You see this here, how these forms work. We call this a value register. Yeah? And such a value register is for governance purposes extremely important. If you take an AI system these days, and you want to have AI governance, and you take an ISO standard like ISO 42001, which is an AI governance standard, it tells you, just on the first page, basically, it tells you, please write down the issues in your system. Write down the issues. Well, this is what we do. We write down the issues, and we identify those issues, but the way we identify them is we identify them with the help of moral philosophy. And we put them down and we collect ideas on how to improve the system. And once we have collected them, we aggregate them and we analyze them further, we discern. And what we discern we discern core values that come back and back again. For example, in this case, it's a telemedicine platform. And for the telemedicine health context, of course, privacy turned out to be one core value. From this long list of things that stakeholders talk about, we discern this one value, but we also do not only have in such collections then that people care about privacy, but the stakeholders have concretized what it is exactly in a telemedicine context they care about. So those exact value qualities are being aggregated around the core values. So in the end, we have very sophisticated structures of core values at stake when such a system is being built, like in this telemedicine example, it was a Vienna startup. And so we might have 10 of these value clusters, 8 to 10 value clusters, 5 to 10, something like that all are around high intrinsic core values, privacy, dignity, control you might see there, digital sovereignty, whatever the stakeholders conceive to be relevant in the context of this system of interest. And it's specified around what's meant by this ethical principle. This is what we call conceptualization. So it's not enough to just say, oh, you know, in telemedicine, obviously privacy is an issue. That's not enough. If you want to build a system, you have to conceptualize that, concretize it, and you have to do that by listening to your stakeholders on one side. But if you have a value like privacy, you must also look into the law, because in the law, privacy is also conceptualized. And if you want to build an ethical system, the minimum thing you also need to do is to have a legal system. So we combine conceptually the law, if it exists for that value, with what the stakeholders said, and we end up with this kind of structured view on what such high ethical principles mean. And once that is done, from that structure outgoing, we define the system requirements. So you see here on the left side, you see the value cluster, the core value principles, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 of them. And then we define what's here called EVR. EVR stands for Ethical Value Requirement. So we are trying to understand if you want to realize the value quality in your system, what are the ethical value requirements your system needs to live up to? And once you have those ethical value requirements, from there on you can derive through threat and control, through a risk-based approach, system requirements. I give you one example what that means for the privacy context, and it shows you immediately how this flows. So you have a system, you realize privacy is important, you know that a value quality for privacy and data protection, one value quality needs to be in place, which is informed consent. The cookie notification, basically, I showed you earlier, informed consent. Then the EVR, the ethical value requirement, well, there are quite a lot of ethical value requirements that need to be in place for that informed consent to be ethical. For example, you see here the whole list. This informed consent must be meaningfully and comprehensively describe the personal data processing activities that this telemedicine platform is conducting. It must be meaningfully and comprehensively describe the activities to the users. It must truly and voluntarily obtain patients' processing consent. And it must offer users easily accessible and fair options to decline consent. So what you see here, core value privacy, value quality, and for informed consent, this value quality to realize, you have these 3 different ethical value requirements that must be in place. And once you have those ethical value requirements, you can ask the questions, well, if this needs to be in the system, what could go wrong so that the system doesn't live up to this ethical expectations. And this is in the EVR threat analysis. And these EVR threats are then countered by so-called EVR controls, and these are the concrete system requirements. So to read the first line to you here, privacy is realized through informed consent, and consent is only confirmed, is only informed when it meaningfully and comprehensively describes the personal data processing. But very often, as we all know, these privacy policies are not meaningful, and they disguise information that is actually relevant for the users who have to click on it. And so a control is to offer a complete and honest overview of personal data sharing and processing activities with a view to those areas relevant for patients' privacy perception and judgment. So if you take a little bit of more time at the end of this course and you read through such a table, you see a line of thought. And that line of thought goes from a high-level principle to very concrete system requirements. And if you run through this kind of lines of thought for all of your core values and value qualities, you end up with a pretty long log of system requirements that have to be present in the system to make it ethical. Last slide on this one is that this analysis is put down in a so-called value register, and in the end you have for all your high value principles concrete measures and a trace back to how you went from value principles to the system requirements, so to practice. And when there is an auditor, a compliance manager, you get into a legal trouble with your organization and you want to prove what you did in order to protect people's privacy, you cannot only show them the system, but you can also show them your line of thought and how you derived your system requirements, and you really show them that you made a great effort in your organization to live up to the expectations of stakeholders and of the law. So you have a wonderful governance instrument. And this documentation is then the result of your project. Very simple, very straightforward. We did already 10 case studies, and we also accompanied the development of this process and its realization with a little bit of research and case studies, and 2 PhDs were recently completed on the matter. And I just want to share with you a little, 2 data points that are also interesting to consider. When you run through such a project and you have to create such forms, a value register, and you have so many system requirements, you might say, oh, this is a lot of work. And you might fear that it costs you too much or spends too much time and effort on it. But besides, of course, the result that you will be legally compliant, no matter whether it's the Data Act, the Digital Service Act, the Digital Markets Act, the AI Act, the Data Protection Regulation, once you're ethical, you don't have to worry about the law. You can reach your compliance by simply doing the right thing and showing that you did it. So that's one reason why this is wonderful to do. But the other one is that basically we showed in our research also that when you run across case studies, smart studies, telemedicine case, any other kind of app, whenever you do such a project, the sensitivity of these philosophical questions make that such projects identify 10 times more issues, risks potentially associated with your system. So I can only say, if you don't use this approach and you don't realize that you have any issues, and afterwards you have to do a compliance exercise, or you use 42001 as a governance instrument, and you haven't collected properly your issues, then I don't know what you're actually reporting. So with value-based engineering, you have this 10 times higher sensitivity to value risks. That's one study we did. And then there is a very nice news. As you go along and you do those value reflections with your stakeholders, there are also a lot of great product ideas that are being collected. And you also see here the number of ideas for better products, for better features, for making your product really wonderful from a customer perspective. And we showed basically in the data, in the research we did, that creativity is exploding around projects. So you will not only cater to risks responsibly, but you will also create much better systems that are so much more creative and wonderful for people to use. So this is also scientifically proven. And because that approach is so powerful, is standardized, boosts your creativity, makes you sensitive for risk. We also won Austria's most important innovation award, which is called the Game Changer Award in 2023. And now, of course, is the time to teach people and give organizations insights, not only at this level of detail that I could talk about today with 45 minutes, but to really learn how to use the 7000 standard and do value-based engineering. And for that reason, we founded 3 months ago the VBE Academy here in Vienna. It's a Vienna company, small startup, but we collaborate also with IEEE, and we are now basically exporting digital humanism across the world, because we do not only offer these training programs here in Vienna, but also worldwide. And as part of that, we also offer certification through IEEE, and also Austrian Standards offers a professional certification for value-based engineering ambassadors. So this is a really nice development, very recent. And so please visit us here on the VBE Academy. Thank you so much.
Please come forward with questions. Who wants to start? Sophie?
Thank you so much. It's really interesting. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the relationship between this approach and creativity. So I'm just, from a social science perspective, I'm trying to understand, because it makes absolute sense in terms of threat assessments and these things, but how does it boost creativity or new product ideas?
So there were a couple of ways of how we looked at that. We looked at the number of product ideas. We looked at, so literally, if you don't use VBE and you use traditional product road mapping, we looked at how many product ideas did the stakeholders have. That was the pure frequency and quantitative scale, but we also looked at the kind of ideas and whether people would be coming up with original ideas and spread out across different value domains. Yeah. So would they have more social thinking than technical thinking, or would they focus on environmental values also? And so the originality and the quantity of ideas was measured.
Thorsten?
Thank you very much for the lovely talk, and the ideas, they're wonderful, and especially to integrate it into the engineering process. One of the questions that I would have is, with new technology, it's kind of hard to envision its impact and envision also, I would argue, the negative consequences. So before the smartphone was there, I think it was hard to envision how deep of an impact it has. The addiction, I don't know whether anyone would have guessed that. So how does the approach deal with the unforeseen? Let me put it this way.
Yeah, so it's important to regard value-based engineering as an ongoing iterative process, as it is also typical in system and software development today. So the value register is a living product feature backlog also. And if you realize that your system produces negative values, you would restart at some point in that process and say, for example, okay, so do we have to morally analyze that again? Or do we already know what are the moral consequences? So we go right away into formulating EVRs to improve the product and derive system requirements to basically fix the issue. So iterativity and cyclicality of this engineering process is important to see. I didn't have the time to show the details of that, but another angle of your question is also at what point in product innovation can you actually use value-based engineering if you're, for example, working on perfectioning vision algorithms, vision recognition, also algorithms. Are you are so far away from concrete applications that you might, as an engineer, not already see the issue because you don't know what your technology is going to be used for. And I think there was a big case in Google, what was it called, Marvin. It was a case where engineers had worked on recognition technologies, vision algorithms that were then later used in drone technology for military purposes. Project Marvin, I think it was called, and they were very upset that they learned that their algorithms would be used for this military context, and they started an initiative in Google and said, we don't want our algorithms to be used for military purposes. And the point is that when you work on Grundlagenforschung, also basic research, where you are not knowing about the application of usage, then value-based engineering is not your methodology of choice. But as soon as you, for example, in an AI context, train your AI with specific kind of data, where you, for example, you train an AI for a health context, then you know basically what your AI is going to be used for. And as soon as you know the application context, you can use value-based engineering, no matter whether the architecture and the concrete concept of operations is already there, or whether you are in early stages of that.
You raised your hand? Sorry. You didn't raise your hand, okay. For any further questions? Not the case. Thank you so much, Sarah, for this talk.
Thank you.
And today we have a great combination because Tanya Sinozic-Martinez will now lead you to the world of the city of Vienna, and where these methods are being used already. So we have use cases for the IEEE standards family in industry, but also in the world of public administration and policies. Tanya is an expert for science and technology studies, for science and technology policy, also environmental policy. She studied in various renowned universities in the UK and did her PhD at the Science Policy Research Unit at the University of Sussex. And among the positions she filled were a number of years at the Institute of Technology Assessment, which has also some ex-ante elements, but is also often an accompanying or ex post assessment of the effects of technologies. So you are very well trained in this kind of activities. For a little more than a year, or about a year now, Tanja is working with the city of Vienna in the Stabsstelle, or a kind of unit for coordinating research and technology policy issues in the city of Vienna, and we regularly meet in this context. So Tanja, welcome, and we are looking forward to your talk.
Thank you very much. So we are very, very fortunate to have excellent scientists like Professor Spiekermann and the other speakers of this lecture series locally in Vienna, so that we can transfer quite some knowledge to our local practices. And at the City of Vienna Public Administration, our main goal is to improve the lives of the citizens of Vienna. And I'm very, very glad to be able to share with you today a real-world example of using value-based engineering to improve the public services of the City of Vienna. And by the end of the session, I hope you will have a good idea of how VBE works in practice at the city administration. As Michael already said, I work at the Office for Science and Technology and Business Location. And one of the topics that we have been working on in the last few years is how to translate and transfer concepts of digital humanism to support the technological transformation of the previously mostly analog services of the City of Vienna. And one of the reasons why we have started to contemplate on this is because of this sort of differences between the positive and the negative aspects of digitalization, and how on the one hand it improves comfort and access to information, and obviously allows us to do extremely good data analysis. But on the other hand, and this is extremely important for us, it has extremely negative consequences such as addiction, exclusion, high resource use, cybercrime, power asymmetries, and loss of autonomy and education and skills. And so we looked to science to find a way in which we can try to minimize these negative aspects in the digitalization of the public services. So inevitably, when we started to think about how to translate these concepts into our work, we asked ourselves, and continue to ask ourselves, of course, what is a good digital life in Vienna, and who is making the decisions on the products that we use and the services that we consume, and which trade-offs are we willing to accept? And of course, this has a lot to do with the ideology and the political priorities which we set. And we know in international comparison, there are cities set different political priorities. So for example, if the priority is security, now this is translated into increased surveillance. And if the priority of a city center is short-term profits, then you have the negative consequences of increasing inequality. And Vienna, the city of Vienna, needs to decide which way will it go, and which way will it continue to go, and choose to go in this rapidly changing context. And as you already know, Vienna is continuously listed as one of the highest cities with the highest quality of life. And why is that? Well, most of these criteria rest upon its provision of public services, such as housing, transport, the reduction of pollution, the provision of public healthcare and education, low crime rates, the high provision of local cultural services, its central location in Europe and proximity to the countryside. And of course, digitalization impacts on all of these areas which have primarily been, thank you very much, which have primarily been analog. I mean, the values that underlie the provision of all these public services did not previously associate themselves with the comfort of digital services. And with the digitalization impact of all these public services, we have to make sure that the ideologies that underpin them are maintained. And in order to do that, we translated digital humanism into an ecosystem at the city of Vienna. The kickoff for this was the Vienna Manifesto for Digital Humanism, and what followed is several governance strategies and strategic government documents, such as the Strategie Wien 2030, the Digitale Agenda der Stadt Wien, and the research funding calls for digital humanism, which you all already know about from the WWTF, the support for ethically oriented firms and startups by the Wirtschaftsagentur, and the events organized by the Stadt Wien Bibliothek, and most recently an excellent book on digital education for schools called Digitalisierung und Wir, which is also being translated to different European languages and will inform high school students on the principles of digital humanism and ethical issues in digitalization. So the process of translating these theoretical concepts into the work that we do was summarized in a digital humanism brochure, and we set this up by showing the examples of ethical, digital, socially aware digital projects in the various areas of public service provision, and with examples such as, for example, how if you use an IT documentation system, how do you assess it for its transparency and different kinds of standards that are currently available in order to assess the products that we buy in. Now, of course, we also, let me see this, exactly, we also produce our own digital products and services. So we don't buy everything in, and so we cannot just rely on evaluations and assessments that then tell us how ethically sound these products that we buy in are. We develop also our own products, and so with that we, of course, are using value-based engineering in order to improve them. And value-based engineering has been listed in the Digital Agenda 2030 as a method of choice in order to complement our digital innovation processes and integrate it into the innovation work of the digitalization of the public services. And so now I would like to present to you an example of how VBE has worked in practice at our in our work, which focused on a public service platform called Mein Wien. So the point of this public service platform is to make it easier for people to work with public documents, to get information. So, for example, imagine you're, trying to extend your parking permit, or you're trying to extend your passport, or you're going to the airport and you can't find your passport, and you need to call different offices, and they all have different opening times, and they keep telling you that they need different documents from you, and you're running around, and you would love to give up if you could. And so so in order to sort of help with this kind of situation, the city of Vienna has decided to develop a platform where this kind of administration of personal documents could be a little bit easier. And the project was internally led by Alexandra Prinz and Franziska Führer at the IT Strategy Office of the City of Vienna, and externally supported by Mario Tokarz at Right Mind and AI, and he has also designed these slides that I will show you now. And this is the picture of our team. So what is MindWien? So this is the first step in the VBE method, is to show the stakeholders and yourself what kind of product you're working on and what are the different dimensions of it, and how can you explain them so that the stakeholders involved, who may not actually have been VBE educated or have actually thought about different functionalities of these IT products, how they can understand them, and how can they at best relate to them, so that together in this stakeholder workshop we can get information on how to improve them. And so the core platform was described in this way, with its 5 main functional blocks. And with each of these functional blocks we had different use cases and scenarios of how these the functional blocks could be designed. So starting with login and registration, information offers, customized dashboards and administrative processes, managing documents, and sort of the generic administrative process. And so we analyzed this in a workshop in October, and we tried to get a most heterogeneous group of people to be represented in this workshop. And luckily we got the attendance from the Helfer Wiens, the Vienna Anti-Discrimination Office for LGBTIQ Matters, Department of Data Protection, E-Government Law, Vienna Social Fund, the Vienna Health Network, and Child and Youth Welfare Services. And so we got the workshop results. First of all of us who attended this workshop, these VBE relies on handwritten documents. So when you do all these various analysis steps, you have to fill in these forms. And so we were sort of running around the various use case scenarios and the various functionals, and it's an extremely nice and interactive process. And so we create these lists after of course, the process has been described to us. And then the team translates these documents into Excel sheets, and through their analysis arrive at the values that are considered to be the most relevant by the stakeholder team. And these are the 5 values that came out from the individual feedback points. And I will explain a few of them to you. And so they also included 33 value qualities for these for the core values. So for the inclusion value cluster, we have a selection of 45 feedback points on possible risks. So the focus here is to get as much information as possible on what the stakeholders think are the risks and threats of these different functions and different varieties of functions. And for example, such as people who don't have the ID Austria account might be excluded. Or this is a very interesting one. So if you have just sort of one or two family members who are informed about the other family members, that they're going to be the one who have to do all the work on this platform for the whole family. So that you actually exclude people who are not maybe so digitally literate from the use, and then all the work goes to the one person who knows how to use it. And so from these kinds of risks, the next step is to realize, so the steps are actually to get closer and closer to the actual practical solution. So the next step is to find the value qualities which realize the value in the product. So this is, for example, that regardless of IT skills, access to the platform is made possible. So as you can see, this is not yet the actual solution that the IT specialist is going to program, but it's going in that direction. The needs of different caregivers are considered, that MeinWien is not discriminatory, that the equality between parents is ensured, barrier-free design, and that different kinds of people are directly included in the development of the platform, and that there's always the analog options for the how to deal with this different kinds of document administration. The next one is the privacy value cluster. So here we had the different kinds of threats to personal privacy, such as that the identity theft, or this is one of the extremely important one in all our work, that now with the increased opening doors of the city administration to private firms, that with the outsourcing of these machine learning processes to private firms, that their data is getting is transferred to other firms without us knowing how and what is being done to it. That that personal information is lost, and that the personal documents constantly need to be protected. So the value qualities which realize this value are control over data access and sharing, data integrity, and the security of access to the data that is administered through the platform. Another value cluster is the trust value cluster. And here some of the threats are that the AI system that is, or the machine learning system that is used to support the platform makes mistakes. And these mistakes are extremely important because these have to do with personal documents. So people are afraid that that these mistakes cannot be rectified, and what happens if the functions don't work, and that what happens if you don't understand what you actually have to do in order to get to the type of document that you need. So the value qualities which realize this this value are that the quality of functions is assured, that the content in the platform is consistently comprehensible to all literacy levels, that feedback is provided within a reasonable time frame, that user data is handled respectfully, and that in-person interactions are maintained, and that people have a possibility to talk to people if they have problems with it. So, as Sarah previously said, the core artifact for minimizing these risks in practice is the value register. So this is a sort of a document which you constantly have to go back to in order to, when new risks come, when problems need to be solved, when because technology is so dynamic that you constantly need to be updating this. That's why it's very important to have one or two people who are responsible for maintaining this value register in the entire innovation process and beyond when the platform is being used. And so the next step from value quality is going to the ethical value requirements, and that is also another step to becoming more and more specific in the direction of the technical and organizational solutions. So the next step in our project is actually arriving to the organizational and technical requirements. This is something that we still have to do. And this is something that the IT team needs to do in interaction with us. And now is being integrated into the requirements engineering process of the MA01, the digital magistrate of the city of Vienna. And yeah, so that's, in future, hopefully we will be able to show you how this process has actually impacted the platform itself. So what comes next? So the project is one of a series of projects that we will carry out with VBE at the city of Vienna. And at the end of this year, once we have finished the next one, we will deliver a sort of policy recommendations and integrative model for implementing digital humanism in the city of Vienna's digital innovation practices. And as you can see, it's extremely important in these cases to connect technology development with humanities, with the social sciences, and the University of Vienna is extremely good at offering these interdisciplinary courses. And so I would just like to say that the kinds of interdisciplinary experts that are coming out of this university are essential in designing the digital innovation, and would be extremely helpful in our endeavor to translate digital humanism into digital practices. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tanya, for this great translation from model into a practical application. And do I remember right? That's not the only project that's going on in the city of Vienna. Also, the Vienna public utilities, the Wiener Stadtwerke, yes, have used it already. Perhaps you could share one or two sentences with us on that.
So the Stadtwerke have, as far as I know, they have not used VBE. Yeah. It was more they have used an assessment to assess the transparency and bias in their email documentation system. So they've used an assessment tool, but not the VBE process.
First question goes.
I'm hogging the microphone. Thank you so much. It was really fascinating. I have a question about the context that of the city of Vienna versus businesses, you know, like in a kind of commercial context. Because, I mean, the values that you're describing, trust, access, and these kinds of things, they seem fundamental, but they're also politicized, right? And in your context, this might play a role. I'm thinking of access being translated in these systems into, for example, the system should be there in multiple languages for people who do not speak German, should be there, you know, for equal parental access. Then there might be political parties, for example, who deprioritize these aspects of access in the future. So, for example, parties who think, political parties, I mean, who think that public administration information in multiple languages does not kind of represent the ideal of what Austrian bureaucracy should look like. So does the system somehow protect itself in public administration from this politicization that is, of course, naturally connected to it because, you know, the government of a city or a country or a state is you know, dependent on political debates, and values are also political. So how important we think equal access is might very well change in the coming years with a new government. So how are these tensions realized? Because the stakeholders we're listening to here are obviously the users, and that makes, you know, 100%, 1000% sense. But in a public administration, there are many other stakeholders that influence the success of such a system, most particularly political parties. Is this something that's kind of even playing a role here, or do we kind of take these values just as fundamental? They are just always important. You know what I mean? I don't know if I was concrete enough, but yeah, I'm just wondering if these tensions exist in public administration, to look at the political side as well and think, okay, perhaps in the future, question for German, non-German, or equal, or gender as an identity that plays a role in, or a low, high education. These are very political issues, not just in Austria.
Yeah, of course. I mean, VBE is a bottom-up process concentrating on values. So whether the language, that's sort of the actual operationalization of the value, it comes at the end of it. I mean, so you have, and politics is in everything that we do, right? So how did we try in this group to I mean, we try stakeholder diversity. That's one thing that we can control, and value diversity is something that we hope to achieve in the process, right? Every single person is going to list different. So stakeholder diversity and value diversity is one way to ensure that we don't have these kinds of biases that you're talking about. But I think probably Sarah can say something. Yeah.
Like the business context versus the public administration context. And does VBE need to be adapted in these different worlds? No. Or does it work the same way? Or are just the stakeholders different? Because I mean, legal frameworks play always a role, obviously, for everybody. But here, this kind of political realm that plays perhaps less a role for businesses or startups or this type of innovation is somehow kind of, you know, trying to put a foot in the door of what values are important. Yeah.
I mean, stakeholder diversity will be ensured by using VBE by the public administration and in a business context. So you might have the same group of people. So if in the business context you only have one type of people, then you will have just one type of ideology, right? But if you do it properly, then you will have this stakeholder and value diversity in the team. So it's sort of ensured just by doing what the method requires.
Thank you. One of the questions I could have asked you that I was curious, it's the relationship of value-based engineering to user-centered design and or specifically also usability engineering. But in this particular case, so your application example made it really clear. For, like, I think the way you portrayed it, at least the way I heard it and read it, was the designer and the engineer thinks about what his or her project, what values they want to inject in it. Versus user-centered design is we're going the other way around. We're asking the people that are using the tool, potentially using the tool, how would they use it, what do they use it for, etc. And we're building requirements bottom up that way. So, and what was really interesting in your talk is what's the word? The trust issues can be formulated from I want to build an app. I want to build an environment that you know, where the data that people are using is safe. You can turn it around and says, if I use the system, my worry is, so from a user's point of view, my worry is what happens to my data. Which way are you going? have you thought, and it's not clear for me from your talk, and maybe you have done this, have you sort of sampled the citizens of Vienna and says, hey, if you want to use that tool, what do you use it for? What are your thoughts? What are your concerns of using it, etc.? Are you going that way around as well? And is this also a part of the value-based engineering approach? Do I make any sense?
So that it's representative of all the citizens of Vienna. You mean, yeah. I mean, it's...
You can never ask everyone.
Yeah.
But the question is it very much engineering driven? I have a tool in mind that I want to build, and here's the requirements that I want to put in there, versus, you know, I'm going to ask the potential users what they expect, what requirements they have, what threats they see, etc.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah. That's exactly that's the goal of the stakeholder inclusion is that diversity in stakeholders. So all of these people are treated as users.
And you're going around and asking them.
Sort of.
You go around and actually interview them and do qualitative work in sort of figuring out how they think about it and what threats they see and what ethical values they want to have integrated into the process.
I mean, that might be as a participatory process for the evaluation of a certain, but it's not part of the VBE project to do such an extensive survey. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
No hands raised. Then many thanks for both of you for the great talks and the great interaction, how research ideas first translate into very intense developmental work. You described the nitty-gritty of all the details, and then how it translates into practice. As Sarah in the beginning told us, it's sometimes concepts may sound lofty, but in most of the lectures that preceded today's lecture and also this evening, we could show, hopefully, that there are, be it hate speech, be it care, elderly care activities or whatever, that there are really criterion by criterion, issue per issue, problem per problem, really break it down into concrete tools and processes and procedures. And I think we all can be very proud as people from Vienna that a Vienna-based idea made it into a global standard. Yeah? So we all, be it students or professors or policymakers, we should not shy away from making bold statements, but then know that it's a long and hard way to go on, but there might be great success at the end of the day. So many thanks to both of you. A final applause to both. And we will hear more of these activities in the years to come.
Thank you.